What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Vavu Reviews. Now, today we're going to be talking about M1 chips, right? Apple launched their M1 chips last Tuesday, and they're kicking off the Apple Silicon project with their M1 MacBooks and M1 Mac Minis that are rolling out this coming week. So it's a big deal, right? It's the start of a new chapter for them. It is really going to help us understand how other competitors in the marketplace will interact within the space of custom chipsets and whether or not Intel and possibly AMD would be phased out in the near future. And I've got to admit, after watching the event, I was kind of skeptical for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this event was uncharacteristically Apple, in that the stats and references they brought up were strangely vague, like this claim.
MacBook Air is faster than 98% of PC laptops sold in the last year.
Like, what does that even... Huh? But it brings me to my second reason, which is that Apple went for the unprecedented, no-compromise approach here. And let me elaborate on this. Usually when Apple unveils a new phone or laptop, right, it seems like they're rolling in some features that have been known to be tried and tested in the market, like blazing fast SSDs and high-res displays. But then they'll compromise on things like the lack of a good webcam, dedicated SD card reader or GPU on the 13-inch MacBook Pros because they want to maintain that relatively thin design and aesthetic they're known for. And sometimes because they want their laptops to be almost analogous to a work of art, they'll lose out on potential performance gains, like thermal throttling issues in the past with i9 chips, or even roll out a bad keyboard or two, which to their credit, they've corrected. However, this time, it seems like Apple's M1 chip is the ticket to that no-compromise approach that everyone was kind of asking for. You supposedly get enhanced performance as well as efficiency. The best of both worlds. 20 hours of video playback and 17 hours of browsing on the M1 MacBook Pro, and then 18 hours and 15 hours respectively on the MacBook Air. Those are serious numbers, right? Especially when you couple that with 3.5 times the CPU performance and 6 times the GPU performance. That is insane. Now, these are seemingly outlandish claims. They give me the sense that they're almost too good to be true. And again, there wasn't a real sense of what they were comparing these M1 chips to, or even a reference point for that matter. Now, I'm going to be getting my hands on one of these M1 MacBooks in the coming days to see if these numbers are actually legit, but luckily we have an idea of what the M1 chip is like, as well as some benchmarks to examine. Okay, so the M1 has a whopping 16 billion transistors, right? 5 billion more than the A14 Bionic and the iPhone 12, and it works with 8 CPU cores. Now, half of these cores are performance cores, pretty much designed for raw power, while the other half's built for power efficiency. And how these cores are used is pretty much dictated by macOS and presumably the kinds of tasks you're running. Well, yeah, this is the secret behind that crazy battery life that Apple has cited. Now, another key feature of the M1 is the unified memory architecture, which basically means the GPU, CPU, and the rest of the components access that same low latency memory without using multiple pools. Now, this leads us to the main metric Apple used throughout this event, which is performance per watt. It's important, given that this ARM chipset is now inherently more efficient and flexible, drawing parallels to how users would use their iPhones and iPads. If we look at some benchmark tests, in Geekbench 5, the M1 hit a score of 1687 single-threaded and 7433 multi-threaded. And if you compare these to the A14 Bionic chips found in your iPhones, it beats it quite significantly. But this is kind of expected given the higher clock speeds the laptop can afford to hit because of that larger chassis and the increased core count. So the M1 chip, right, in many ways is a beefed up A14 chip optimized for macOS and just incrementally better in every single way. But how does it compare to Intel chips? TLDR absolutely smokes it in single-threaded tests. The top-end MacBook Pro 16-inch, which is the one I have currently, features a 9980HK, and the Geekbench scores for the CPU readout 1149 for single-threaded tests and 7329 for multi-threaded. And this is all in Geekbench 5. Now, this is the older 14 nanometer chipset, but if we look at Intel's quad-core chips, we're seeing that the M1 is still edging out its competition when it comes to single-threaded performance, even against Intel's highest performing chipsets with the most CPU cores that Intel can possibly ship in its mobile devices. So the fact that the M1 chip is rivaling the Core i9-9980 in multi-threaded performance tests bodes well for Apple Silicon moving forward, and when it does eventually make its way into enthusiast-level setups and desktops. In the AMD side of things, the Geekbench 5 tests here show that Ryzen 7 3700X scoring at 1281 for single-threaded and 8220, while the Ryzen 7 5800X scores 1673 and 11,246 respectively. The M1 matches the AMD Zen 3 chips when it comes to single-threaded performance, but note that the AMD chips are running at a desktop-level setup, like essentially desktop-level power consumption as well. Now look, these are just benchmarks, right? And we all know that real-world tests are far better indicators of performance, especially as more time goes on and the longer it takes for you to actually perform tests and use it on a daily basis. So for everyday tasks like video playback or regular web browsing, the M1 chip is an absolute monster. It is going to destroy most Windows laptops out there as well, given its single-core performance. So if you're in the market for a powerful notebook that doesn't need intense sort of graphical capabilities, like 3D work, or even sort of intense video editing, this is definitely the machine for you. A couple of other things. The M1 chip helps with image signal processing to enhance your laptop's webcam quality, but this definitely won't be a viable substitute for a full-fledged 1080p camera, so just keep that in mind, although I'm still looking forward to testing this out. I'm also still uncertain about the M1 MacBooks doing well with Final Cut Pro or anything that involves text and image compression. And its multi-threaded performance still has some way to go, but this is a truly riveting start to the Silicon project, and I can't wait to see where Apple takes this. Oh, and I just have to revisit this entire 98% claim that we touched upon earlier. They're claiming that the laptop outperforms 98% of the best-selling Windows laptops, and I'll ignore how obnoxious that sounds for a second, but I think it's safe to assume that given the benchmarks, this applies to the 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. And while the Air is indeed using the same chip, the Pro will definitely outperform it for most tasks, given that it has a slightly larger chassis, which translates to superior cooling. Still a weird stat. 98% of best-selling. What? No, they shouldn't have said that. You can buy these off of the Apple site right now and customize these laptops to your liking. And yes, your options will be even more limited now given the unified architecture, and you'll be stuck with just 2 Thunderbolt ports. But hey, those Intel options are still available for those who want it. And if you want more information on what the ARM architecture is actually like in comparison to the Intel x86 architecture that we're all used to, go ahead and check out my video on that down in the description, and I'll probably have it here as one of the links you can access as well. So feel free to check that out. But that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section as usual, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.